Welcome to today's webinar, everyone. My name is Barbara Scafidio, and I'm the editor of Preview Magazine and will be your moderator for this webinar, which has been made possible by Cvent. Our speaker today is Melissa Patterson, Senior Director of Mid-Market Marketing Campaigns at Cvent. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. During the presentation, feel free to enter your questions in the question box. We'll gather them together and hold a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If your questions have not been answered, we'll be providing the speaker with all the questions so she can respond offline. And don't worry if you missed something. The webinar is being recorded and you will receive a link via email to access the recording at your leisure. You will also receive 1 credit hour toward your CMP from the Events Industry Council. For those of you who attend the entire presentation, you'll be eligible for our drawing for a $100 gift card. I will announce the winner at the end of the event. So sit back, get comfortable. The webinar begins now. Melissa, take it away.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm super excited to be here today to talk about proving the value of your events. Before we get started, I just want to take a sec to let you know there's a survey available in the chat screen. It's just a 2-question survey that asks you how you liked the presentation today. That helps me understand what content's working and how we're doing. And then we also ask you if you're interested in more information on Cvent's product set. So if you take that survey, you'll get access to one of our newest ebooks about proving the value of your events. It's really great companion content to today's session. And we'll also send you an e-certificate for a cup of coffee if you take that survey. So appreciate you doing that. It's in the chat. If you wait to the end of the session, you can do that and let us know how you're doing. So Barbara gave me a nice intro. Thank you. Like I said, I'm really happy to be here. I've tried to start including my Bitmoji when I do my intro slides just to have a little more fun in life. And so I thought this was like the life preserver theme was going along with what we were talking about today. If you want to chat at me, you can get me at Melissa on Twitter. If you want to join the conversation, please use hashtag CventWebinars, included with whatever hashtags you might be using so we can participate in that conversation with you. So we all know that feeling of panic or maybe some sweaty armpits that happens when our boss or maybe even our boss's boss asks for an update on the return we got from the last event we did. And we know probably in ourselves that event was successful, but putting that success into terms and explaining how successful that event was in terms that executives can understand might be a bit of a challenge for us. It's a challenge for lots of us. We have some data that will show that will help you feel like if you're in this camp, you're not alone. And so when senior executives are really asking for bottom line numbers, don't worry, it doesn't have to be an emergency. What we're gonna talk about today is how to be prepared to answer those questions and how you can set yourself up for success so you don't have to feel that panic, that you can answer confidently about how successful your events were. So here's some of that data I was talking about. 91% of event planners believe their meetings and events are effective. This is based on Cvent's annual benchmark study we do where we survey over 1,000 planners. And so you can see planners are like, yes, we are doing a good job. These events are working. And we know that they are because organizations continue to invest in them. That high impact of face-to-face relationships are effective. That's why we keep doing them. But when you get to how do you know that, there's my Bitmoji again, just in case I was wondering, maybe it can be tough to tell that story. That's the sort of setup we did, right? And here's where you can see where you're not alone in this struggle. This is a chart by Marketing Profs where they're looking at the ability to effectively track ROI from any given channel. So if you think about the marketing mix, all the different things that marketers do to get their messages in front of their audiences, The infusion of digital tactics, right, over the last 20 or so years, those are highly trackable things, right? So you can see email, super effective. You send an email, probably has some kind of campaign ID on it. You send them to a landing page, they fill out a form. You have this really nice attribution story you can tell to show how effective and impactful that email was. Same thing with your event, probably, right? You can probably tell if people register from that specific email. It's easy to tell that story because everything happens online. But if we start to think about some of the more traditional or offline channels, we can see maybe isn't as easy to clearly tell that story of impact. And you can see live events and conferences way down there all the way to the right in terms of the ability to track it. So we show this just to make you feel like I'm not alone. This is a tough thing to do, but also to like talk about what that sort of idea of offline is. When we look at all the easy things to track, right? Email, search, online ads, website, direct mail, have some kind of component where we drive somebody to a website to do something and relatively easy to tell an attribution story. So infusing technology into those channels and digitizing them, so to speak, has made it much easier to tell the ROI story. And so that's really what we're going to focus on today is how do you bring your events, which are typically offline, and start to think of them as more of a digital experience that you can actually track and show the effectiveness of. And then just a quick pause to talk about really what we mean when we say ROI. It's really just, today what we're talking about is the return that you get from the effort divided by the investment that you have made to get that equation for ROI. And so most of the tips, four of the 5 tips I'm going to talk about today are about the return portion of that story. So, so really making sure you're maximizing the dollars that you get from your event program. So whatever the goal of your event is, whether it's bookings and sales, that's mostly what you'll hear me talk about today because it's easy to translate it into that way. But you could also layer the same lens on membership, right? Education and training, if you have a monetary component, fundraising, right? Whatever the purpose of that event is, you're doing it for a reason. And likely that reason is somehow tied to dollars. So being able to say this event drove this many dollars. So 4 of the tips going to focus on the return and just 1 on the investment piece and keeping that investment low because we know the lower the bottom line is, the top line doesn't have to be as big to show a great return. But the awesomeness, right, is when you can keep your investment small and your return is really, really big. Then you have an amazing story to tell on ROI. But we could do a whole webinar on how to keep your investment low. But just today we're focusing on this return piece mostly. So let's just jump right into it and get into these 5 tips for, knowing this question is going to come up and how do we prepare ourselves to appropriately tell an ROI story that resonates with executives. So the first thing to put in your toolkit is capturing the right data. And the way you do that is to really start to think about the unique value of live events. And what data are you capturing to help tell that story? Because we know from surveying thousands of attendees that on average, attendees travel 500 miles to come to an event or a conference, spend over $1,000, and give up 2 to 3 days of their time away from the office, away from their families, away from their inboxes. I like to say the things that are going on. That's a big investment. Most organizations are spending 24% at least, according to Forrester, of their overall marketing budget on events. And it's because we know the value of these high-touch face-to-face interactions. But what sometimes they're missing is this skin in the game that attendees give you. So in the earlier examples of the marketing prof slide, when I was talking about like how easy it is to track that someone comes to your website and does something like download an ebook, we put a lot of time and energy and effort as marketers into being able to track that behavior and extrapolate buying signals or an intent out of like the topic of the white paper means they're interested in our product, right? And that's a pretty low skin in the game for the person who's interacting activity. But when we look at the event and what the person's willing to give up to interact with our content in our event program, and if we're not thinking about that as giving us super explicit expressed interest and doing something with that data to help impact what we're trying to do, we're really missing the boat. And so that's the data story we're going to talk about here today, is how to take all that time and energy, all that skin in the game that your attendee has, and understand how that translates into buying signals, which will then give us the data we need to pass in to our selling teams to really start to have an impact, an increased impact on ROI. So let me tell you what I mean here. If we look at the attendee journey, and as you start to think about infusing, or probably you already are at some points in this journey, infusing technology, those give you data. The fact that you're taking something from a manual process into a digital one, so doing things like badging and check-in or automatically setting up appointments or online registration, all of those become data points that you can collect about your attendee to not only provide a better experience for them, but also to capture data that you can use to then give them a better experience and inform your marketing and selling engines so that then you can impact and increase your ROI. So let's specifically look at what we mean here. So traditionally, from the marketing perspective, that's always like the seat that I've sat on and working with my planning teams. What I would know, right, we do all this stuff to promote the event, to get people there. And then what I usually know is that the person showed up. And even like a few years ago, it would literally be like a printout of an Excel sheet that someone did like handwritten ticks on, right, to tell me that the person was there. And then we'd use that Excel and we'd load that into our systems to update the campaign that the person was on to say, yes, they showed up. And then we could do all the relevant downstream things for our selling teams and our marketing follow-up based on that manual tick, right? And so but that was really the only piece of the story that we knew. And so now, fast forward, when you infuse something like automated check-in, so instead of somebody standing and looking for the person's badge and looking for their name and checking it off or checking them off within the computer themselves, if you put a tablet in front of somebody so they can walk up, correct their information if they need to. My name's always misspelled, even when I enter it. I have a tricky name. Make those corrections and print their badge right there on the spot. You have in real time digitized information. Oh, the person was there and they checked in. So that's the first hurdle, capturing it in a new and better way. But then as the event goes on, you have all of these opportunities to both enhance the attendee experience and capture data about what that person cares about. So if you take within a session, for an example, if you do poll and live Q&A, you get additional information about what that person, their thoughts and feelings about the content they're consuming, what they're doing. We like to say that attendees literally vote with their feet. So when you think about your education sessions and that content that you're presenting and your lineup of speakers and the education sessions that you're offering, just like when someone comes to the website and consumes a content piece or a white paper, an ebook, or even just a blog post on a certain topic, you can extrapolate the pains that those people are trying to solve digitally with what content they're consuming. You should be thinking about the context of your event in the same way. So understanding what sessions those people attended will really help inform you about what problems they're trying to solve, what potential other products They might be interested in what another level of membership, right? Another level of donorship, all those things, right? Understanding what topics people want to know and hear more about helps you then better do follow up and provide the right offering to them. And then not only did they attend and show up, which sessions did they get to, but then ask them to give feedback, and being able to do that in a digital manner so it's scalable, collectible, and you can tie that to that specific person. How did they like it? Is just another insight that you have into how effective that content is, and then also what's the right next offer for them based on how they're interacting and liking that content that they've consumed. Exhibitor booths. So whether you have like a product innovation pavilion where you're showing off your products, or if you have partners and sponsors, exhibitors, understanding where people are visiting and what they might be interested in are really great product interest or pain indicators as well. So similar to that session type, understanding what people are looking for in terms of which vendors they're seeking out, or what products they're seeking more information on, goes in that bag of that profile that you're building, which helps inform what the person cares about. Who attendees meet with. So digitizing that appointment setup gives you insight, even pre-show, into who they're interested in meeting with. And then as the meeting happens, giving those people that are hosting the meetings opportunity to take notes within a system that easily gets collected and added to the person's attendee profile so it can be used for other things later. All super impactful and important things so that you can see as you digitize this, make this happen. It's easy then. You're building this file of insights about the attendee and about the person that you can use to accelerate sales cycles, pipeline, create more opportunities, all of those things. And then being able to understand what somebody's interested in and actually get to them to a demo either on site or really quickly after the event, right? If someone demos a product, they are pretty interested. And so the story here is the ability to accelerate that. So maybe in a past life, that demo wouldn't have happened until post-show when a salesperson reaches out. If you understand, this attendee has attended 3 sessions on, let's use my example, on how to improve selling ROI, we should show them our product on how we help them do that, and we can do it on site at the event to help accelerate that selling cycle. But also a really great indicator of direct product interest and what the right next offer should be. And then within surveys, just literally asking people how they liked the event, how they liked the content. You hear me doing that with our survey with the webinar today. I want to know, did you like the content? And I want to know, would you like additional follow-up from us? All really great ways to identify who within the mix of your attendees who should be prioritized for follow-up, and how your selling teams can best prioritize what you're doing. And then there's also really great ways to talk about brand impact and how the attendees liked the event that we'll talk about more throughout the presentation as well. So I've given you just a bunch of examples there of how you can start to collect the data about your attendees that can help ultimately start to impact your ROI. But just collecting the data isn't enough, right? If it stays in your event management system, it's harder to take action and tell that story. And so the second tip here is to start to share that data with your critical business systems. That's really how you start to have the ability to demonstrate that ROI and show return and connect event attendees to active opportunities. The critical junction here, first, collect the data, and then second, put that data into your systems so that you can start to translate it. And we literally, think about digital footprints. In digital marketing, we've been talking about digital footprints for a long time, really since the early days of websites and being able to track this way. I remember in sort of early days of Eloqua, this was a big concept for them, as sort of like digital journeys and looking at people's digital footprints. So what we're talking about here today is doing that same thing in this traditional offline channels. I use that sort of metaphor. Your attendees are voting with their feet, and that's really what it is taking those activities that people are doing when you stop tracking those things manually or with counters, right? When you put a digital aspect to that, you can start to tie that specific behavior to the specific attendee, which then makes you gives you the ability to build these digital profiles, which then we've seen from other tactics and channels gives us the power to show how impactful they are. So this is the one area when I talk to planners, they are just like, this seems overwhelming, right? Like, I'm just trying to throw a great event. And now you're talking about like integrating my critical business systems. And so I want to illustrate it. I don't want to make light of it because it takes the organizational effort to do this, right? Like, you as the planner are probably not the person responsible for integrating all this stuff up, but you can be the champion that gets the right people in the room to start having the conversations. And so that's why I want to illustrate this for you today, so you start to get some context around what it takes. And I'm going to give you an example from one of our customers of how they approach the workflow of the story. But really what we're talking about is taking your event management system, whatever you're using. In this case, I'm talking about Cvent today because I'm with Cvent, but whatever event management system you're using, and making sure you're integrating it with your marketing automation tool, if you have one, and then even potentially more critically, your CRM system. So the system that you use to manage your opportunity lifecycle, the ability to connect those opportunities to the event activity is what will help you demonstrate the ROI. And then any other behavioral information, sort of that implicit information that people are giving you based on those feet votes, what content they're interested, who they're interacting with, what they're doing, all then fuels better follow-up, both from a selling and a marketing perspective, which then increases the likelihood that the opportunities will close. So if you can tie the campaign activity from the event to the opportunities, and then give marketing and sales teams more insights into what the person wants to do, more of those opportunities will close. And that's really what we're talking about today, is sort of the how to do that. So I'm going to give you an example here. This is Kevin Borwick. He's a customer of ours. He's with PwC. And you can see his title here. He's in operations. So he works with the marketing and sales organizations on operations, and he was a key player in their integration project. They integrated Cvent with Salesforce and Eloqua to do some of these things we're talking about here. And so Kevin, in his story, when he talks to us about what they did, they really set out to do three things from a business objective, and they laid them out. So first was to digitize their event program. He talks a lot about driving uniformity, right? So that in the big organization, you got people doing all kinds of different things. And so they wanted to drive one process and digitize it so that they could simplify what they were doing and have sort of one view of their events, regardless of who was planning or what department. They really wanted to simplify that process and get to one view, and then finally collect data and use it to make good business decisions. And that's where the ROI piece comes in. So he broke down for us just how they approach the workflow. And I think this was really cool because even for me, like, I've been telling this story for a few years, like, yes, integrate Cvent with your marketing automation platform and your Salesforce or your CRM, whatever you're using for CRM. But when I saw this workflow that Kevin put together, I was like, oh yeah, this so makes sense. And so that's why, even though it's a little bit like dense slide, I really wanted to show it today because I think it can be illuminating to see like, oh, this is exactly what we're talking about in terms of workflow, business, and then the systems talking to one another. So we can see here, so somebody in marketing can request an event, right? So they set up a form. And so this is within their business process. The marketer submits the form, and then they have a group of people in, key stakeholders in the business who review and approve the event. So this is how it's like, yep, they look at things like, is there a budget? Whose budget is it coming out of? What's the need? What's our expected return, right? Like the marketer has to do a little mini business case for the event. Key stakeholders review it. They also make sure all the right inputs are available within the form to actually create the event so that the system's needs. So they do a couple of checks. And then if the event is approved, if it meets the business compliance, then a triggered event happens, and they create the event in the Cvent platform. And then the integration between Cvent and Eloqua pushes and creates an Eloqua campaign within the Eloqua system. And so now that event is associated to a series of workflow actions within Eloqua. And that Eloqua action then, because their Eloqua and Salesforce instances are already integrated and they use the campaign integration between Salesforce and Eloqua, now a Salesforce campaign gets created within Salesforce based on the Eloqua data. And so they're doing all of their marketing of their event through Cvent and capturing registration through Cvent, and all that information seeks back into Eloqua and back into Salesforce. So they're creating that connection to the campaign and giving the marketers visibility into what's happening, as well as the sales team, right? So because this is all integrated, it happens in real time. Someone registers for the event that a salesperson's been talking to it, they know it. Within the course of the conversation, they can bring it up, or they can stop bugging them about registering for the event, or whatever it is. So this all happens pre-event within the registration component of what's happening. And then the event starts. And then a whole sort of day of portion. So this is the attendee journey that we were talking about. All that sort of data that could be collected, they've slimmed it down, and they're looking at, did the person arrive at the event? So they're using Cvent's on arrival iPad, which is the example that I gave when we were talking about checking in. And so they know when somebody types their name in and says, yes, I'm here, and prints their badge, that information syncs from on arrival into the core Cvent platform. And so their status changes from registered to attended. That syncs into Eloqua, all in real time, right, into Eloqua, and then pushes into Salesforce. So selling teams on the floor are still back at your headquarters or main office or wherever, even in the field somewhere else, know, oh, my person just showed up for the event. Imagine the power of that, right? Like if you could send a text that says, oh, I hope you enjoy the event, or seek out XYZ person, or there's a gift for you at the cocktail hour tonight, or I bought you a drink, or whatever it is, right? Like you can see that sort of power of the real-time information for your selling teams and also for the marketing effort. So then there's just a note here that then they have dashboards that they're starting to look at, because that Salesforce campaign association is happening. Then they can see right away how many leads, how many opportunities are being created, even while the event is happening. All the leads, opportunities, and closed sales as a result of that event are all being tracked, all in Salesforce and Eloqua. After the event, the data that they captured through all of this syncing of data that we talked about, then is able to be segmented on and can be used for both marketing follow-up and lead prioritization. And so in addition to the attribution happening, they also are putting insights in the hands of the salespeople and the marketers who are doing the follow-up for the event. So you can really see the power of that. And from Kevin's perspective, right, when somebody used to ask him about the ROI of his event program, he might have felt like this, like, ugh, rocky waters, right, in order to tell that story. But Now, after the integration, I know this is so cheesy. I'm sorry. I sort of cringe inside of myself every time I do this slide. But you can see, like, he's a winner, right? He's avoided that emergency and those troubled waters, and he can tell the story. This would only be cheesier if I photoshopped his face on this person, which I considered, I have to say. But he not only avoided the ROI emergency, he's now like this hero for his marketing and sales and planning stakeholders, because they now all have the information that they need, so nobody's feeling stressed about the ROI story. And so this is the business impact as summed up in Kevin's words. He gave this a broader version of this story example at Cvent Connect last year. And so these are specifically his words about how that they've improved their customer experience. So because they've sort of streamlined and made their events more unified, their customers are getting a similar and the same experience every time they attend an event or register for an event. Very seamless and similar experience. They're able to do super targeted follow-up post-event because they have all the data they need. They've given their business leaders the ability to track their events all the way through to pipeline and closed revenue or closed bookings. They've allowed their marketing teams to quantify the impact of their ROI, of the event ROI, which is what we're talking about here, because their planning and the planners and marketers know this is how much money we spent on the event. And now because they've connected the opportunity data, they know how many bookings they drove. And so they can tell that they can divide that bookings number by the amount they spent on the event, and get that ROI number. And then they've learned a lot about what's working in terms of both driving the people to the event because of the integrations. They can see the mix of marketing that people are interacting with pre-event, and then they can see who actually attends and what happens. And all of that is fuel for better future both marketing and event marketing campaigns. So tons of insights that then they're now using to optimize their programs. Super cool. So now we've talked about what data do you collect. It's super important to connect that data up with your relevant business systems. But now let's spend a few minutes talking about attendee experience. When I talk to planners, most of the time when I ask them, how do you know if your event was effective or what are your goals based off, attendee experience is almost always a key metric for people, because we all know that engaged attendees are more satisfied, more likely to advocate, and more likely to return. And that's how we can justify the cost of events. And so this attendee experience metric, even if people can't tell their full ROI story, like which opportunities the event really impacted, they're laser focused on this attendee experience metric. And I would say that capturing the right data and integrating it with those systems is only half the battle, because if your attendees don't have a great time, they probably aren't going to do what you want them to do. And so it's really important not only to have that data and to hook it up so you can see what's happening, but also to use the technology to provide these really great attendees, because we know happy and engaged attendees are the most valuable attendees. And that plays out right into the events we plan. So much effort goes into creating these super amazing, memorable sort of FOMO experiences. So when people leave the event, all they can talk about is what an amazing experience that they're having. And so much focus on that experience. But I would say then also think about those things that could be friction points, that could be detracting from the amazing party and the super fun stuff and these memorable moments that you're creating within the course of the event. And so we've talked about this already a little bit in the conversation, but reducing that friction at registration and check-in, having no line, being able to walk right up, print your badge on demand, not having to stand in a line and wait for somebody to tick off or manually count or do whatever, or being able to share your information super easily with someone who you want to follow up with, right? Digitizing these experience, providing really important engagement points within the context of sessions, being able to answer a poll from the palm of your hand, ask a question from the palm of your hand, take a picture and post, see what's next on the schedule, see what conversation is happening around the event, right? Like all of these technology points not only introduce an opportunity to optimize or to track and tell a better ROI story, but they always also really enhance the experience for the attendee. So don't lose sight of that too as you're evaluating technology, making sure people are having a great experience, not only with the party and fun and education stuff, but also in the points where there may be friction because there isn't a technology solution. Think about how you can reduce those friction points. And then finally, that post-event survey is the best way to find out if people were satisfied with the event. And so that's the point here, right? Like all these things are leading up to making sure somebody answers positively when they fill out that survey. But the post-event survey results are the things that that's the like key metric that leadership is going to focus on. So not only making sure you've set up that great experience, which you probably have, that's what you're here, in your position to do, right? It's the core of your existence, but also making sure you have the right data to be able to tell that story. So think about when you're preparing those questions within your post-event survey, think about how you want to be able to tell that story to key executives and make sure you're asking the right questions that really help you tell that story. And then the other thing that I like to tell people to do, even if you're not, don't have a full integration where you're like tying everything back to opportunity data, most people can do a manual poll to compare people who attended events. And then, even just your customer list and how much those customers share with you. And so this is like a place to start that I tell people, but also continue to do it even after integration. But start to track and look at average attendee satisfaction with deal band, so how much people are spending with you. And I bet you'll be surprised the attendees that are most satisfied and love your events the most are probably either long tenured and or spending more money with you than those who either aren't attending events or aren't as satisfied. So another good metric or thing to illuminate when you're talking about the value of events is the impact that those are having in terms of customer life cycle. So how long the person's a customer with you, and then how many dollars they're spending. Planning and headaches often go hand in hand. We all know that, right? And during the entire event life cycle, something is bound to go wrong. Sometimes it's little things, sometimes it's big things, sometimes it feels like everything. Aspirin and pain relievers are an essential part of any meeting and event planner's event kit. And so I set up this illustration to say, think of your events as aspirin for your brand. When you have a headache, you have a favorite pain reliever you probably go to. You trust it to get the job done. You probably advocate for that type of pain reliever to your friends. And your impression of them is probably really good, right? Because they relieve your pain. And so the same thing can be true about your events. They have the same effect on your attendees. They build brand affinity, and they have people want to tell other people about your brand and be part of a larger story. So let's talk about how brand sometimes gets a bad rap of being this sort of touchy-feely aspect, non-trackable part of this equation, which is one of the reasons I wanted to focus on it, because it can be really valuable. Oh, we know it's really valuable. So we got to talk about how to tell that story. During your event, your attendees are the center of your attention, right? That's what we've been talking about here. They're interacting personally with your brand. All of these amazing experiences and memorable experiences that you're queuing up, all not only are on the attendee satisfaction front, but they're really building a relationship with your attendees and building that brand loyalty and broadening the reach of your brand like nothing else you're probably doing in the marketing mix. And the thing is, sometimes in the sea of details are surrounding the event, it can be easy to take your eyes off how your events are really impacting that brand in so many ways. And these are the things that go beyond cost to revenue ratio. That importance of your own organization brand surrounding ROI is like, I don't know, untrackable almost, which is probably part of the problem because it's bigger than we can even put a sticker on. We just know, like, you can look at research, but when you deliver incredible experiences, your brand will be better for it. They result in higher customer satisfaction scores, higher perceived value, higher perceived quality of your products and services, and higher customer advocacy rates. So super important not to lose sight of this aspect of it. And then when you go to try to tell the story of the impact on brand, I want to give you some tips on which data you can look at to both collect and then translate the story. So first, that post-event survey, super important. I know we keep talking about it. If you're not doing it, you should. Most people are doing it, but think about the right questions, like I said before, to ask. So in this case, you could include a question that asks, has your impression of the company or the brand or the organization increased or decreased because of the event? Or would you refer the company to your friends and colleagues? Just two ideas of how you can use that survey to help tell the story of brand impact. Next, social media. So capturing all the relevant information that's happening in the social sphere, around your event, and also website metrics. So probably during the course of your event, you will see big spikes in both social and website and sentiment. And so being able to look at the time, we at Cvent, when we do events, we usually look at a 3-week window. So we have a baseline average based on month and seasonality and all those things of number of posts, number of shares, social sentiment readings, and then same thing with web traffic. Like, we know what our web traffic is like. And then the story we tell post-event is look at the spike. So how much more of share of voice did we have during that time? You can compare to your competitive set too, but just how much more of the conversation was about your brand during that event period than not during event. And that can be a really compelling piece of the story to help stakeholders understand, like, all these extra mentions, all these extra people on the website are all, even if they're not like qualified and relevant prospects or customers, just like capturing that share of voice within the event all translate into more brand affinity and more recognition of the brand. So these are the core data set to look at to help tell that story. And then if you work with a PR agency, they can help quantify the brand impact too. So don't think you have to do this on your own, or your corporate comms team can help you tell the story. But these are the types of metrics to pull in when you want to start to like prove the impact of the event that the event had on the brand. And then finally, this is where we're going to switch and now talk about how to reduce costs. So we've been talking about all these things you can do to help get more return from your event, so to increase the dollars that you get. And now we're going to spend just a couple minutes before we jump into Q&A talking about one way to think about reducing costs. And there's lots of ways to do that, right? Especially within the context, well, there's lots of ways to do it in general, but within the context of event management, right? That's one of the selling points for why to use event management tools is closer visibility into your budget, and then gaining efficiencies, which then helps you reduce costs. But the thing that I want to focus on today is something maybe that you don't always think about, and that's event retention. And so when you think about driving attendance to your event, it's more expensive to get a new person to come to your event than to drive repeat. And so a core metric for your ROI story that you share with stakeholders should be around event retention, especially if you have a dollar number about how much it costs to get a new person to the event versus a return person. This can be a compelling story for stakeholders about the effectiveness of your audience generation program. And all these things that we just talked about, attendee experience and creating this amazing experience, will help people want to come back to the event, which is really going to help you master one of your line items and keeping costs down around promotion. So if you follow the steps that we've talked about already today here, you should be in pretty good shape. But we know how difficult it can be to retain event attendees. Even when you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, it's just a fact that retention is difficult. And if you can't retain people, it means spending more money marketing and promoting your event. And that ultimately cuts into the ROI. One of the things we do at Cvent, because a lot of times we'll see not repeat people, but repeat people within the organization. So we cut an org slice too. So both repeat at the person level and repeat at the org level are important portions, because it makes sense, right? Especially if people have bigger teams, like not everyone from the planning team or the marketing team can go to all the same events every year. And so looking at that as well, that it's not the same person, but another person within the org, also important in the metric. So just a tip there to include an org level view in addition to the person level view. So you've heard me say it several times within the course of the conversation here today, but great events lead to an increase in the size of business deals, donations, member retentions. Enter whatever you're trying to accomplish with your event here. If the event is great, you should get more of them. And so that is all awesome, but we want to also make sure that we're keeping our costs down a bit. And so if you're not telling an event retention story within the construct of your ROI story, I would encourage you to do so. The metrics you want to use here are your registration metrics and showing how many attendees are returning attendees. And don't forget also to include, so do the person level in the org, but also your exhibitor counts, speaker counts, slice the data out so you're looking at the relevant segment and really being able to tell that story. And then looking at your marketing mix and how you're marketing your event and the dollars you're spending to do that, and which channels are the most effective at both driving new registrations and what's the cost, and then which ones also result in repeat visitors. So all really important things to look at and ways to think about telling that story. Hopefully you'll include event retention story. So my last sort of point here, and don't get freaked out by the marketing funnel, but I just want to illustrate the power and what the real impact on ROI could be within a scenario. So probably if you're in the marketing department or you are a marketer and you consider yourself a marketer, you're probably somewhat familiar with a lead funnel. I live and breathe funnels like this every day. And so the concept here is that, if you put a certain number of leads into the top based on conversion metrics, which you probably either know for your business or you can use, sort of industry standards, a certain number of booked opportunities will come out the bottom. So in this scenario, just honestly for simple math, we're using 1,000 leads. So if you can expect to get 1,000 sales leads from your event, and we can expect that if we could expect that 40% of those leads would turn into sales qualified leads. So sales would say, yep, I'll work this lead. I think it's a good lead. And then half of those that they're working and chasing and setting up appointments with and doing demos with turn into opportunities or opportunities contributing to pipeline. And then if 20% of those opportunities end up turning into booked business, that gives us 40 opportunities. And at an average sales price or an average opportunity price of $10,000, you can see this event resulted in $4,000 in booked business. Now, just the illustration I want to make is if you infuse event tech into your event and do a bunch of the things that we talked about doing here today, you could feasibly say, okay, we're going to digitally capture lead, we're going to put insights in, we're going to be able to queue up 20% more sales leads from the event just because of all these things that we're doing, driving more people to the event, getting more efficient, right? 20% more leads. And then if we just assume a 5% lift through the funnel, you can start to see the real impact that just doing a few of these things can have. So 5% lift in SQLs is not a huge lift, right? And you can see how arming your selling teams with all those insights could result in many more opportunities. And so you can see all of a sudden we've nearly doubled the bookings from the event. So this is not a promise. It's just an illustration of what we're thinking about. Even if you cut those numbers in half, right, you can see how spending a little time capturing the data, integrating them with your systems, and then arming your selling and marketing teams with that relevant data can start to have a real impact on bookings. And then if you're able to also reduce your costs, your ROI story gets really, really rosy. You know, it doesn't have to be a dream. It can be a reality. So I've given you a ton of information today. And so I just wanted to recap quickly those 5 tips. Capture the right data, share the data with critical systems. Don't forget about attendee experience and how it really does positively impact ROI. So make sure you're setting yourself up to be able to tell the story of attendee experience as well as provide that great attendee experience. Don't forget about the brand impact and then event retention. Getting people to come back to the event can really drive cost reduction in your marketing efforts around getting people to the event. So 5 tips, hopefully they were somewhat useful. I think Barbara probably has some questions for me, but I just do want to make a quick note. If you want to take that survey that's there in the chat box, there's a link to the survey. It helps me do all these things I just said that we should do. And you'll also get access to the ebook, and we'll send you a cup of coffee.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Melissa. Lots of information there. And we do have some questions. I encourage all of you to take a second right now and plug your questions into the question box. We'll get to as many as we can in the next few minutes. If you stay on for the full presentation, we're going to be drawing a winner for a $100 gift card. So I hope you'll stay on till the end as well. So I have a question here from Alta. She said, I'm in the life sciences pharma field and find it difficult to capture ROI for scientific meetings. Any suggestions?
So, I mean, without knowing like why she's having a hard time, like I would say like do all these tips, but I'm wondering if there's something that's keeping her from doing some of these things. Okay.
I mean, certainly they're heavily education based.
Yeah.
Alta, if you're there, feel free to type a little more and we'll flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, maybe it's because they're not selling anything. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what she's thinking, that it's more about like broadening education.
Right, which is a very different kind of meeting from these exhibit, trade show kinds of meetings.
Yeah. So I would still say like there's an ultimate goal here. Maybe it's not money, but maybe it's like getting a certain number of research things done, or like think about what your goal is outside of the meeting or of generating the dollars. So if dollars aren't the goal, what is? Is it units of education done, people educated, research sourced, right? Whatever it is, and think of that as your opportunity. So instead of dollars, it's like, how many things are we doing? And then you can run all of these same formulas in terms of if the person attended the event, they are either we're just counting them, and so then you're focused on number of people and their satisfaction, maybe, or if then you're also trying to get them to do something afterward, then that's where you can tell that downstream story of, we got this many people that registered, this many people attended, and then this many people did the next thing we wanted them to do, and here's how the event impacted that. Does that sort of help?
I do have a lot of people asking if they can get a copy of the PowerPoint. So we get that to all. A question here from Chelsea. Actually, I have a couple of people asking about basically post-show event survey questions. Are there key questions which we should be asking? Another person asked, where can we get advice on crafting these questions?
Yeah. So we have a bunch of best practices about question crafting and templates, honestly, that I can follow up with you afterwards. It's part of like our professional services and what we offer to our customer set, but it's stuff that we are happy to share with anybody, even if you're not a customer. So we can follow up with you that way with ideas. But I will say, just like overarchingly, so we're not leaving you hanging, is thinking about how you're going to use the data. So sort of what we talked about today. So if attendee experience is an important metric for you, then make sure you ask a question about how satisfied were you with the event. If you're wondering about brand impact, right, I gave a couple of examples on brand. You'll see my question after this, like, how would you rate the presentation, or how would you rate the event as a whole, right? So looking at that kinds of things, asking about like what people would like to do differently. Are they do they plan on returning again next year? That's one of our like core metrics, is how many people say they're going to return again. So I can also share like our Cvent Connect post-event survey, if that's helpful too. You can see all the different questions we ask in our post-event.
Hugely helpful from one of your actual events, yes. Mm-hmm. Here's another having to do with, there's a lot of data. We've spoken about data for the past hour, but how, who does the extrapolating of the data? This person asked. Do you make recommendations or leave that for the planner?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of ways to answer this question. So it sort of depends on what the data set is. But if you're looking at survey result data, oftentimes the planner, it's our planning team who's like telling us back the results of the survey. But if it's like you're looking at your opportunity data and like how the event campaign itself ties into like bookings and business, then it's usually somebody in marketing or sales operations who's helping the planner translate that story. Obviously this is all across the board because it depends on your org size and who's doing what. We have at Cvent, we have professional services that can help you do it if you have a small team, or you can hire agencies that help you do it if you don't have the right people. Or once you figure out, this is what I tell people, once you sort of get your template, we can help you. If you're working with Cvent or whoever your event management provider is, they can help you set up your template to tell the story. And then if you have your data set fueling into your template, and then you can tell that story back to the executives, right? So it's not like you should do it new every time you have an event. Like, you want to set up your core metrics and track those. So once you get that set up, then the planner can tell that story. Look at what the data that's pulling into the template, and then tell that story over and over again.
Okay.
It's not like I think that's what seems scary, is like once you do it a couple times, then those are the same metrics that you track over and over. It's like your baseline, and then you're seeing how you compared. So it's not like you have to do a data project every time. Unless then the data's there if you're trying to diagnose something, right? Like, why did this go wrong? Then you might want to take a deeper dive.
Okay. We've got room for one more question. This is interesting. This is Vanessa, Michelle. We have moved away from paper evaluations after doing paper and mobile app entries for evals, but they aren't getting the number of evals they used to get with paper, with their app. Would it be bad to go back to both? Are paper evaluations frowned upon at this point?
I mean, so you're talking to the technology person. So I would say,
yes, we should poll our
yeah, poll the audience. So here, let me take my like technology hat off, my vendor hat off, and just say, like, practically, if you feel like you're getting better results from paper, I would say that's what you should do. But then you have to allow for, do you actually do anything with that paper? Do you actually have someone go enter all that information into a spreadsheet so that you can do something with it?
Right, and doing both, and it has to be entered.
Right, like you got to do that. You got to match it up. So if you're willing to do that, and you think, but I would also say, I would appeal to you that before you do that, try to do a few things to get people to do the digital ones. Make sure every session presentation includes a reminder to open the app. Like literally, it's very effective for us at Cvent Connect. We ask every speaker, we run a contest. So whatever speaker gets the most session rating submissions and the best win prizes. And so the speakers literally will say, like, before you leave, open your app, do it right here. We only do 2 questions and to rate the session, and it's incredible the results that you drive if you just ask people to do it in that moment.
Okay. I do have a winner of our $100 gift card. It's Tressa Lotito. We will be getting in touch with you right after the webinar ends. I do want everyone to know that you'll receive an email with the recording along with a link to the survey. I hope you will see us at a future preview webinar. We have our next one November 15th at 11 Eastern. Rhonda Brewer, former president of SITE and head of the new Women's Leadership Initiative, will discuss the findings of a new survey of 708 women by SITE and Preview called Women's Issues. And if you can't make the time, sign up anyway, and you will have access to it for a full year after the broadcast. For today, thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. Melissa, it's always a pleasure to work with you, and I look forward to the next time. Everyone have a great rest of the day.